A baby is latched onto your chest, and instead of closing their eyes, instead of drifting off the way you assumed feeding babies do, they're staring directly up at your face. Not casually, not sleepily, locked on, wide open eyes that don't blink, don't wander, just hold you in a gaze so steady it almost feels like they know something you don't. Most mothers call it sweet. Some say it makes them feel watched. A few say it's the most intense eye contact they've ever experienced with another human being. But neuroscientists who study infant attachment have been investigating this exact behavior for over a decade. And what they've found doesn't just explain the stare. It redefines what breastfeeding actually is. Let's start with the obvious explanation. The baby is hungry, they're eating, your face happens to be right there. Proximity. Simple mechanics. Except it's not. Because here's the problem with that theory. Bottle-fed babies held at the same distance, in the same position, with the same sightline to a caregiver's face, don't sustain the same gaze duration. Not even close. A 2020 study published in Developmental Psychobiology tracked infant gaze behavior during breast versus bottle feeding and found that breastfed infants maintained 40 to 70% longer mutual eye contact with their mothers. Same baby, same face, same distance, different feeding method, completely different gaze pattern. That's not just proximity. Something about the act of breastfeeding itself is triggering a deeper neurological response. And the reason is one of the most extraordinary mechanisms in human biology. During breastfeeding, the infant's body releases a cascade of oxytocin. You already know that. But here's what most people don't know. The mother's brain is releasing oxytocin simultaneously. And when mutual gaze occurs during this dual hormonal surge, something remarkable happens in both brains. Researchers at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel measured neural synchrony between breastfeeding mothers and their infants, and found that eye contact during feeding produced the highest levels of brain-to-brain coupling ever recorded in a mother-infant pair, higher than during play, higher than during talking, higher than during any other interaction tested. The brain waves of the mother and the baby begin oscillating at the same frequency. Two nervous systems, temporarily fused into one synchronized network. And the gateway to that fusion is the stare. Your baby isn't just looking at you while they feed. They are using the neurochemical window that breastfeeding opens to hardwire your face into the deepest architecture of their social brain. But here's where it gets stranger. Because that gaze isn't doing the same thing at every age. Researchers at Birkbeck, University of London, ran gaze tracking experiments on breastfeeding infants at 2 weeks, 2 months, and 4 months. At 2 weeks, the infant's gaze during feeding is mostly diffuse. They're looking at your face, but they're processing contrast. The hairline, the edge of your jaw, the border where your skin meets the background. By 2 months, the gaze narrows. They lock onto your eyes, specifically your eyes. And by 4 months, something shifts that the researchers did not expect. The baby begins tracking micro-expressions, a slight tightening around your mouth, a shift in your brow, the difference between a relaxed exhale and a held breath. They're not just looking at your face anymore. They are reading your emotional state in real time, while physically attached to your body, while your neurochemistry is fully open to theirs. You are not just feeding them milk. You are uploading your emotional operating system directly into their developing brain. Now I need to tell you about a finding that made researchers rethink everything they assumed about what babies experience during feeding. In 2016, a team studying the neuroscience of lactation at the University of Yale use thermal imaging and cortisol mapping to measure what happens inside an infant's body when the breastfeeding gaze is broken. Specifically, when the mother looks at her phone. The setup was simple. Mothers breastfed normally, maintaining natural eye contact. Then at a random interval, they were asked to shift their gaze to a screen for 60 seconds. Not pull away, not stop feeding, just break eye contact. In over 70% of infants tested, the following cascade occurred within 30 seconds. Suckling rhythm destabilized. Cortisol levels rose measurably. Skin temperature on the infant's extremities dropped, a hallmark autonomic stress response. Some infants unlatched. Others increased what researchers call non-nutritive sucking, a self-soothing behavior that mirrors what's seen in the still face paradigm. The baby didn't just notice the gaze was gone. Their entire physiology responded as if a channel had been severed. Dr. Ruth Feldman, one of the leading researchers on biobehavioral synchrony, summarized it this way. The breastfeeding gaze is not a byproduct of feeding. It is a biologically embedded signal that regulates the infant's autonomic nervous system in real time. When it's present, the baby's body is in a state of neurological safety. When it's absent, the body begins to prepare for threat. That baby staring up at you is not admiring you. They are regulating their own heartbeat using your eyes. There's one more layer, and it's the one that changes how you understand what breastfeeding is actually building. Researchers at Harvard Center on the Developing Child have spent years mapping the long-term cognitive outcomes of early gaze-rich interaction during feeding, and the data is unambiguous. Infants who experience consistent mutual gaze during breastfeeding in the first 6 months show measurably stronger development of the orbitofrontal cortex by age 2. The orbitofrontal cortex, the region responsible for empathy, emotional decision-making, social reward processing, the neural infrastructure that will determine how your child handles relationships, reads social cues, and regulates their own emotions for the rest of their life. Every time you hold that gaze during a feed, every time you resist the pull to check the notification, every time you let your face be soft and present while they stare up at you, you are not just bonding. You are building the part of their brain that will one day allow them to love someone else the way you love them. Now the important note, because there is one. If breastfeeding isn't possible, if you're bottle feeding, if you're pumping, if the circumstances of your life mean feeding looks different than what's described here, the gaze still works. The research on neural synchrony during feeding shows that eye contact and responsive facial engagement during bottle feeding activates the same coupling pathways. The oxytocin release is lower in the absence of suckling-triggered hormonal feedback, but the gaze itself, the mutual attention, the contingent responsiveness, that is the active ingredient. The delivery method is secondary. The stare is primary. So the next time your baby latches on and looks up at you with those wide, unblinking, slightly terrifying, completely beautiful eyes, understand what is actually happening. 2 brains are syncing. A nervous system is being regulated. An emotional map is being drawn. And a region of the brain that will define who your child becomes is being built, one feeding at a time. Thousands of years of evolution didn't design breastfeeding to just deliver calories. It designed it to deliver connection. And the interface it built for that connection is the gaze. If this changed how you see feeding time, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment. I want to know, have you ever felt that lock-on gaze during a feed and sensed that something deeper was happening? Because now you know, something was. And if you want to understand why your baby smiles at you mid-feed, unlatches, and just grins at your chest like they've heard the funniest joke in the world, that's the next video. And the reason is not what you think.